to say.
Thanks a lot, Ed. Thank you. Thanks very much, Ed. Afternoon, everybody. I'm here really because everything the programme's trying to do is doing on a small scale what we're trying to do on a large scale in Greater Manchester. Rethink things from the bottom up. Start with people, start with places, and trust people, listen to people, and then things will be starting from the right beginning. And that's what we're all about with Devolution. It's brilliant that we're here just to say something about this, because it's significant for me, because I am actually the Labour and cooperative mayor of Greater Manchester. When I was at my count at Manchester Central, 3 of the returning officers called me the Labour and Conservative candidate for Greater Manchester. I do get accused of facing all ways at times, but that is taking it a bit far. But I've always been a big believer in the cooperative movement. I think Rochdale borough-wide housing continues the tradition, and I've always felt that co-ops have got a much bigger role, should have a much bigger role to play. I don't think we've ever quite cracked it really in terms of public service delivery, but I think we need to, and this is why I've got my eye on this, because I see it amongst all of our Greater Manchester housing providers. Already they don't think of themselves anymore as housing providers. They're placemakers, and they're about building strong people and strong communities, and it's really interesting to see that taking shape. Just to kind of though bring home to you the scale of the challenge we face, and actually Matthew and I were just having a chat about this. I think we are in many ways, Rochdale is I would say a victim of an over-centralised political system that has never quite actually made policies with Rochdale in mind, and it's been the victim of all of that change over many years. And let me kind of really bring it down to what that means in practice in 2018 in this borough. As mayor, I've kind of put a big focus on young people. For me, the point of devolution is to do things differently, as Greater Manchester famously likes to say it does things. So if things aren't right at the national level, this is our chance to say, well, no, we do it differently. And when I stood for election, I said that, the Westminster approach had been to make young people the target for cuts and promise all things to older people because they're the ones who vote. Quite a cynical approach, but that's what I think has been going on in politics for quite a long time. So I said we were going to reverse that. We're going to make young people our priority for investment, and we're going to start there, because you can't achieve what we would want to without a young generation that is enabled to fulfil their potential. And as part of that work, we commissioned a survey that asked 300 year 10s, I think they were, in Oldham and Rochdale, across both boroughs. Asked them a range of questions, so we were trying to find out about them and their lives, but asked one question that was very, very significant, and it was this: do you have hope for your own future? Now, just think to yourself about that question for a minute, and think back to when you were a year 10 age, or what was it in our currency, 4th year or something like that. I think most of us in this room would have said, even though life was tough in the 80s, most of you kind of grew up in that era, I did, I think we'd have had a real strong sense of stuff that wasn't good around, but I think we had hope that you could do something and you could get on. Well, the answer to that question from here was 40% couldn't answer that question positively. 40%. And I think in truth, it's probably bigger if you go into the most deprived. If you really looked at the most deprived schools or the most deprived wards, it's probably over a half, I would say. And that's it, isn't it? We have a kind of system, an education system that is, and it's not just today's young people. I think it has got worse, but it has left a lot of people without hope. A lot of people unable to see how they get from where they are to where perhaps they would want to be, and what they might aspire to be. I think it's a product, isn't it, of, as I say, an education system that obsesses on the university route and doesn't focus on technical education. It's built to focus on some kids rather than all kids. But then you kind of go further on and look at the issues that we face now as a society in a town like this, and it would be true for many other towns in Greater Manchester. We have that lethal and quite toxic combination of insecure work and insecure housing. So people are living with a situation where they don't fully know perhaps how many hours they're going to work every week, and Matthew has done absolutely outstanding work on all of this. But it doesn't stop with work, because there's many more people in the private rented sector now. And if they don't know how much they're going to earn at work and they can't pay their rent, they can be evicted very quickly. I've done a lot of work, as you know, on rough sleeping and homelessness in Greater Manchester. Eviction from private rented property is the single biggest cause of homelessness in Greater Manchester. So that's the reality. People are living with levels of stress, insecurity, and possibly hopelessness. That is sadly what we have at the moment. And the question is, can devolution do anything about that? Mention has been made by Ed of the Town Centre Challenge, and that is an important initiative for me. For those who don't know about it, I asked each borough to nominate a town that could receive focused attention from me. I have extra powers as mayor around compulsory purchase and the establishment of mayoral development corporations. We've got housing funding, various things that I can do. And what we're trying to do is kind of get this sort of a focus on the towns that have been neglected. There is this divide now, isn't there, between town and city. I think people can see it. You could see it in the referendum result, actually. Cities, by and large, voted Remain, and the towns that felt neglected by the political system of Westminster and Brussels together, I think were saying more than a message about Europe. They were sending a message about neglect. If devolution is to mean anything, it's not just that the city centre becomes ever more gleaming and built up, although it is being built up, as you can see. It's got to mean something for Rochdale, for Oldham, for Wigan, Lee, Bury, Bolton. It's got to bring real change. And I'm working now with all of the 10 boroughs on this town centre challenge, where we're saying, let's rethink the place. They're not going to be the retail destinations that they once were. So let's make them great places to live. Let's replace the retail space with more quality residential space that people can afford. But breathe new life into the place, bring people back in, get people connected with each other to opportunity. So that's what the Town Centre Challenge is all about, and this very much does connect to that. But it's broader as well with regard to how do you actually regenerate people and communities in terms of hope, giving them hope where perhaps they didn't feel they had any. I've just come from a meeting in Rochdale of the Greater Manchester Health and Care Partnership, where we have health devolution. And effectively what we've just signed off is an entirely new model of delivering public services, which is doing the same thing with public services as Rochdale Borough-wide Housing are trying to do with the way they think about their services, which is start with the person, start with the place, and break down then all the barriers between the silos and work in that way. Individualised solutions for people. And we've basically agreed that that's the way we're going to work from here on in. Crucially, treat the voluntary and community sector as an equal partner in that endeavour. Get out of the box-ticking regime of, this is passing the people from one service to another and no one actually taking responsibility. Think about names, not numbers. They like to think of statistics, don't they, and targets. Think about the names of the people in the different localities that we need to help. And that is quite groundbreaking, I would say. I don't think it's happening anywhere else in the country. We just had a presentation from Lee, where I used to be the MP, where literally now people are working through something called the huddle, which is a meeting every couple of days where they come into the room, police, council, drug, alcohol, teachers, police community support officers, all professionals, social workers, and they have a discussion about the families who need help within the community and the range of how they can signpost them to the voluntary sector, or it's a completely different way, how they can stop them being sanctioned actually by helping them get to what they need to do. It's a completely different way of working. And it's much more empowering for the professionals actually that are working within that system. But this is the way we're building things. It is early days, and I wouldn't want to be over-claiming, but we are trying to kind of rebuild things from the bottom up and make them work for people and places. And I'm quite happy to be kind of held to account in the next, say, 3-4 years. If devolution hasn't made an appreciable difference to life in Rochdale, then quite frankly, I will have failed as mayor, because it's got to. And it's here that we should be making most difference. And that's what we're all about. So I'm here to kind of find out about this programme, but also just to say I'm going to have my eye on it to see if it can help achieve those things that we're setting for ourselves at the Greater Manchester level. Help people to help themselves, to help their own communities, bring back some hope where there currently isn't enough. Link people to better work. We're about to bring through a back of much of what Matthew did, a GM Good Employers Charter, where we're going to encourage people from the bottom up, voluntarily, employers to do more to take away the insecurity and the stress, reward people properly. This all knits together basically in terms of what we're trying to do, and I'm really confident. And maybe this sounds a little arrogant. I hope you don't take it this way. But in the next decade in this country, I confidently predict that more social change for the better in England and in the UK is going to come from people taking inspiration from what's happening in Greater Manchester rather than direction in the old way from Westminster. I think we have a responsibility here, because we have a devolution deal that allows us to do more than anywhere else, to use it, but use it to inspire others and to say, well, why don't you do it? We're not special. We're just using what we've been given, and therefore build things out from the bottom up. Because I am absolutely certain that we can't carry on as we are. For me, it was really liberating to leave Westminster. It really was. You don't realise how unhappy you are there until you leave it. The kind of benches that encourage the point scoring, the focus on the process of politics and not the issues that people are facing, the silos of policy departments that trap people in an old way of thinking. It's such a kind of change really to come into work every day and just be thinking about the place or places rather than the politics and the point scoring. And I kind of feel very strongly that given where we are as a country and given the way our over-centralised political system has basically left us in this crisis, it's given us a north-south divide, a housing crisis, half of young people in many places without hope. It just hasn't worked. So what are we going to do? And the only answer that I can see, the only light in the particular tunnel that I can see at the moment is this thing called devolution. Because actually when you take power out and pass it down, you can do with, not do to. And there is just a massive difference between those two things. If you involve people in solutions and designing them and debating them and making them feel part of those things, I just think it changes the whole way that we work as a society. And it encourages people to think differently, I think, about their lives. And I just think this is something that has got to be built. The way I look at it, I am a cooperative mayor. As far as I'm concerned, the B means something. No one in Greater Manchester is more important than anybody else. We're building this as a team. Devolution will work if it is about the collective from the bottom up. And I am certain actually we're onto something. There was a poll this year by the BBC who polled people about devolution, and it was really striking. In Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, people felt far more optimistic about the future than in England. And I think it is something to do with devolution. And in Stockport, where they polled people here, 87% said they supported the devolution of power to Greater Manchester through the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I don't think at the moment, in this kind of fragmented time we're living in, could you find an 87% consensus about anything? But we have got one about this, and I think there's a recognition that change needs to come, and change needs to come in a way that passes power down. It's used to empower people, give people a voice that they don't feel that they've had. I was just praising Ed a moment ago. We held the first convention of the North last week in Newcastle, which has come about because of devolution. Who'd have thought it? Both sides of the Pennines speaking with one voice on these issues. So in what can feel quite dark times, I think there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And it's not necessarily in big, grand projects and buildings, and it's actually in projects like this. And this is where it starts. And that's in the way that it all started in that little shop downstairs in the museum. It starts in projects like this. So I'll be, as I say, watching this very carefully. I think things are changing. The voice of those who perhaps haven't had a loud enough voice, and I include in that the north of England for many years, are getting a louder voice. But it will only succeed if we, in true cooperative fashion, build this thing together. So good luck. Well done to Rochdale Borough-wide Housing. Thank you to the Royal Society of Arts for the support they're providing. But this is the change that we need to see, and thank you for being part of it.